The most fundamental element of a video game is interaction, and primarily that interaction results in the movement of a character. Movement in games is a unique thing, and different games can have enjoyable movement based on different things. One shooter that focuses on fast, fluid movement can feel entirely different to play, than a game that prioritizes combinations of moves to solve platforming puzzles. I believe to understand why these games feel fun to play, we need to look at the various techniques that developers use. These techniques aren't an objective analysis of the best movement systems in games. What makes a certain aspect of a game entertaining is just an opinion. What follows comes from my own experiences, particularly from some of my favourite games, as well as the opinions from others based on game reviews and discussions. It looks at movement systems from many brilliant and popular games, and the varied approaches that they use. To start off, let's take a look at basic movement systems and how they can be refined to be smooth and enjoyable. Most games have the basic movement of a character walking around in a 2 or 3-dimensional space, but the enjoyment comes from how that movement feels to the player. A good movement system needs to have controls that feel tight and responsive. A game that runs at a low frame rate or with input lag can feel frustrating and unresponsive, and poor animations resulting in stiff and lifeless movement can feel off. That's not to say that every great game needs to have movement that feels light and zippy. Sometimes the developer wants their movement to feel sluggish and to have a proper weight to it, perhaps better fitting the character or the pace of gameplay. Tight controls and a basic movement system lead to gameplay that rewards finesse and skill. A good example of this is the original Super Mario Bros. Mario has a limited skill set with simple sprints and jumps and some interaction with other characters. Despite the limited moves, the game is responsive and tight, and so the movement feels nice and enjoyable. The challenge and continued entertainment from the game come from finding the limits of this simple moveset. Speedrunning exemplifies this, as its enjoyment comes from watching impressive players at the top of their game consistently pushing to improve. On the other hand, some games focus on advanced movesets, in which a character has different moves they can utilize at any point. The challenge in this system comes from understanding the correct move to use at the right time. Progressing from the simple movement of 2D Mario games is the advanced moveset of 3D Mario games. In Super Mario Odyssey, Mario has a very large skill set available to him, which can lead to multiple solutions to one platforming puzzle. There are tall jumps and dives, hat throws and rolling, all of which can be chained together in different ways. The advanced movement doesn't need to come from different ways of jumping or diving. Some of the best movement systems in games come from odd or unexpected movement, typically pushing the boundaries of a movement system or physics engine. B-hopping is an integral part of Counter-Strike, in which a player moves from side to side in the air to gain speed. These types of advanced movements have made their way into games today, resulting in the modern movement shooter. You have games like Apex Legends, which have slide boosting, or rocket jumping in Team Fortress 2. Another great example of pushing a game's physics system to the edge is Rocket League. Initially, the advanced moves came from simple things like boosting up to hit the ball, but it's now evolved. There are complex things like flicking the ball after dribbling it on the roof of the car. A player can plant all 4 wheels on the ball and get an unexpected flip reset. The types of moves being explored are still increasing as players explore the limits of movement systems. Another aspect of enjoyable movement is when a game's movement system encourages the player to utilize the environment. It keeps things interesting rather than a player mindlessly running from point A to point B to start up a mission. By a game focusing on the environment as a playground for movement, it allows the player to appreciate the world more. Instead of choosing to fast travel, the player is encouraged to explore the open world and everything the developer has decided to pack into it. Whilst a player in Breath of the Wild could fast travel from shrine to shrine, a player that enjoys the mechanics of gliding will come to explore more of the secrets that Hyrule has to offer. A player in Assassin's Creed could just walk around on the ground for the whole game, or they could climb their way up Notre Dame and appreciate the thousands of hours put into its virtual recreation. Games that take advantage of the environment don't always do so to showcase it. Some games put the focus on the environment being the play area and having the players exploit it. In a game like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the player needs to pick out skating lines and use the kinks and edges in the environment to jump off and grind on. In Mirror's Edge, the game focuses on the player finding the optimum line through a series of objects as they parkour from building to building. There are multiple different routes and lines through the environment that the player can take, which can result in different challenges. Mirror's Edge focuses on the player utilising their environment to gain and conserve their momentum. That brings us to the next aspect of fun movement, which is velocity and weight. Having a game that encourages the preservation of momentum rewards players who can consistently keep up their speed. In a game like Sonic, the player can progress the fastest if they can keep up their speed and not hit an obstacle. Having fast movement be challenging rewards good players and keeps the game engaging. For example, in a game like Grand Theft Auto 5, the player can zip around cars and buildings, teetering on the edge of spinning out and crashing. Having high-speed movement ensures that the player isn't bogged down in moving from one location to the next in order to keep progressing through the story. Fast movement and momentum reward good players and increases the skill ceiling of a game while still making it accessible. Furthermore, a game with fast, unrealistic movement can evoke a power fantasy, and as such is great for superpowered characters. The main dispute comes from whether a movement system should be easy and powerful to express this fantasy, or for the movement to be challenging and for the player to earn that feeling of proficiency. In Just Cause 3, the movement system allows for wingsuit gliding as well as parachuting with weapons out. The system is complex and rewards players for good combinations of moves. Despite this, a DLC was released that removed all this challenge from the game. A rocket wingsuit meant there was no need to use the grappling hook, and the rocket launcher meant there was little incentive to use other weapons. Some might say that this fits the intention of Just Cause 3 being a game of the one-man army, but others might say it detracts from the challenge present before. Depending on the intention of the designers, a game's movement system can define whether a player lives out an awesome power fantasy or has to earn that right for himself. With this context, we can begin to look at two of my favourite games and their movement systems. They are two very similar games created 14 years apart from each other. We will be looking at and comparing the web swinging and movement systems in Marvel's Spider-Man for the PS4 and Spider-Man 2 for the PS2. These games are some of the best at translating an existing character's movement into an interactive video game. Spider-Man can swing from web to web, moving in an arc up and down to keep momentum. The swinging is responsive with flashy animations and effects. Spider-Man can web zip to gain a small amount of speed to get him over the top of a rooftop. He can wall run on buildings in order to avoid slamming into them. These different types of moves can all be combined with each other to provide different ways of going about navigating Manhattan. The environment is also a major part of movement. Webs connect to buildings, and so you have to plan out where you want to swing from. Alleys and tall buildings provide different challenges for the player to navigate and solve as they move from one location to the next. The game focuses on speed with a satisfying motion blur and whooshing sounds as Spider-Man gains and maintains speed. The game is the ultimate power fantasy and accurately reflects the movement of the fictional web slinger. These two games all focus on these movement techniques defined earlier, and as such deliver a gratifying movement system. Despite this, they go about it in quite different ways that result in different reactions from the audience. Marvel's Spider-Man very much focuses on the player feeling like Spider-Man. It's very simple for anyone to pick up a controller and swing around like an experienced superhero. On the other hand, Spider-Man 2 focuses on an advanced physics system in which Spider-Man can fling himself to and fro with complex combinations of moves. Because of this, the physics in Spider-Man 2 are much more unforgiving than on the PS4. Take for example the simple act of swinging. For Spider-Man 2, the game doesn't hamper you in any way, it just invites you to experiment with the physics. Let go of the bottom of your swing and you get a massive boost of speed along with the satisfying sound of air whooshing past the character. However, this momentum is hard to maintain swing after swing without slamming into a building. Let go high and you have more time to plan out your movement through buildings. On the other hand, there is little momentum in the PS4 game. There's very slow top speeds for swinging and so it feels much less exhilarating. At the end of the swing, Spider-Man pops up a tiny bit to ensure that the player doesn't hit the ground. This however means that it is much harder to gain and maintain horizontal velocity because the game keeps railroading you into a specific trajectory at the end of your swing. The game fudges the physics to keep the player engaged and not frustrated. This design decision is admirable as the system in Spider-Man 2 can be frustrating. Webs actually connect to buildings and can wrap around them, changing the point of pivot unexpectedly. It's much more frequent to slam into buildings on the PS2 game, losing all the momentum that you built up. However, because this system is more freeform, it can also lead to much more possibilities. Spider-Man can do loops around radio antennas, or fire out 2 webs at a time to slingshot himself. The PS2 movement system opens up more opportunities for the player, and despite the challenges that this creates, when the player can perfect the movement, it feels much more satisfying. Other moves have been dumbed down in a sense. The web zip on the PS4 can be done from any point and in any direction, whereas on the PS2 it locks you into zipping towards the closest connection point. Furthermore, on the PS4 there is a zip to point which sends Spider-Man directly to the connection point, typically a roof edge. This then can be chained together with jumps and further zip to points to quickly move across rooftops. This removes any challenge from the movement, and it turns it into a simple point and click to get from A to B. The wall running mechanic has also devolved similarly. On the PS2, wall running can be initiated only from shallow angles. If you come in too fast at too far an angle, you will just smack into the building and lose all your momentum. If done right, the wall run can result in an effective move to preserve momentum. However, on the PS4, wall running is much slower and easier to perform. The PS4 has no momentum when wall running and locks the character into a slow pace. Furthermore, the wall running can be initiated from almost any angle and can be done in any direction, including running up walls. This difference in the trade-off between speed on the PS2 and accessibility on the PS4 is the main point of contention between the movement systems. Spider-Man 2 focuses on the freeform movement of the character, and so has movement that is high speed and challenging. Some people found this to be too frustrating, and so Marvel's Spider-Man refined this system to ensure that it was accessible to everyone. Spider-Man 2 focuses on enjoyable physics, while Spider-Man PS4 ensures that those physics don't frustrate the player and get in their way. Ultimately, this preference of what makes movement fun, or what type of web swimming mechanics you prefer, is just a point of opinion, and as such, there is no perfect answer. The various techniques that developers implement to have enjoyable movement systems aren't necessarily always faultless or entertaining to everyone. Rather, they are just widespread and favoured techniques in game design.